You would never hear them scream? What kind of sick crap is that? Hey guys, welcome back. If you are new here, hi, my name is Shayna, and in my little corner of the internet, we talk about spooky history of all kinds. If that sounds like something you're interested in, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell because I upload on Wednesdays. I also have a podcast called Spooky History with Shayna Blake, and that is where the audio of this video will be. So if that's more your thing, I'll be sure to have a link down in the description for you. I am really sorry if I sound stuffy. My eyes are kind of red on the sides. We are dealing with allergies right now. The weather keeps going from cold to hot to cold to hot, and we are just miserable over here. But I was really excited to make this video, so I'm ready to dive in. So today's case that we're going to talk about is not super old, but still pretty interesting. So today we are going to be talking about the Watcher house. Now the Watcher home is located in Westfield, New Jersey. Now this town's considered to be the 18th wealthiest in the state and is also the 99th wealthiest in the region of the US. It's said to have many opportunities with nice schools, restaurants, coffee shops, and supposedly is one of the safest places to live, or so people thought. The Watcher house is a very beautiful home. It's located at 657 Boulevard, and it is a 3,869 square foot colonial home that has 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and was built in 1905. I find this home absolutely stunning. It is gorgeous. I would love to live in a home like that. It's very big, roomy. It'd be perfect. Now online, it's said to be valued at around 1.3 million, but I believe it's probably worth more than that with the housing market being as crazy as it is here in the US today, but it is a very beautiful home. I really hope I don't butcher their last name. I'm really sorry if I do. It was purchased by the Brodus family back in 2014, and they purchased it for 1.3 million. Now Derek and Maria Brodus have 3 children, and they were known to be a fairly average suburban family. Maria actually grew up in Westfield, just a few blocks from this home that they just purchased. And Derek actually grew up in Maine in a working class family. It said he was a hard worker. He worked his way up to a position as a senior vice president at a Manhattan insurance company. Now it doesn't say how much they make or anything like that. A lot of people speculate like he didn't make enough money, but apparently the banks thought otherwise, or else they wouldn't have given them the mortgage for this type of home. But I couldn't find his income anywhere. So I'm just gonna kind of ignore that and just move on. This 657 Boulevard was their dream home. So their plan was to fix up this new home, then they would sell the current home that they were living in and then just move into the new one when the renovations were done. So they started fixing up the new home right away, and they were very excited. Unfortunately, their excitement would quickly turn into terror after the 3rd day around 10 p.m. Derek was working on the house alone when he decided to take a break and go check his mailbox. Checking your mailbox is usually a super exciting thing when you just purchased a house. At least it is in my opinion. I know that every home that my husband and I have moved to, I have loved to check the mailbox. I just think it's cool. We get mail at our new home until it's not cool and you gotta pay bills. Anyone else? No? Just me? Well, Derek would find a letter that was addressed to, and I quote, the new owner. And here's what the letter said. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard. Allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard, unhappy. I asked the Woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened, end quote. Now, the Woods family that he's mentioning is the family that sold the home to Derek and Maria. And so immediately after reading this letter, Derek ran around the house shutting off all the lights, and he ended up calling the Westfield Police Department. The police would come by and look at the letter. They essentially told him to make sure to put stuff inside that could be damaged or stolen, and to lock the doors before heading home, and to don't tell anyone, especially the neighbors, about the letters, because anyone and everyone is considered a suspect now. So later on that evening, Derek would go back home to his family, and he would get a hold of John and Andrea Woods, the family that sold them the home, to see if they had received any type of letters that were similar to this. Andrea would end up telling Derek that they did receive a letter from the Watcher just days before they moved out of the home. She claimed that was the first letter they had ever received in the 23 years they lived in that home. So since it was the first time, they didn't feel a need to disclose the letter before selling the home. They just chalked it down to being a prank and threw the letter out. Over the next few weeks, the family would try to move forward and would act like this letter wasn't bothering them, kind of hoping it'd go away, and they would go to the house, do their planned renovations. They would bring their children so they could play and kind of get used to the new home. Maria would stay very cautious, just like I would have been in their situation. She would make sure that the children would always stay where she could see them at all times. If they would get out of view, she would call their names and tell them to come back. I do the same thing. My kids, when they want to play outside, I let them. It's usually while I'm cooking dinner or something, and the backyard's fenced in, so my kitchen's right there at the backyard too, so I can just look out the window, and if I don't see them like playing on their swing set or playing out in the yard, I see them over at the ends of the fence maybe, I'm just like, hey, you get back over here where I could see. Don't talk to strangers that come up to the fence. I'm very cautious about that kind of thing. So I completely understand her being extra cautious, especially after receiving a letter like that. I wouldn't take that letter very lightly either. Now, they knew that it had to be a neighbor that was terrorizing them, but didn't want to seem unfriendly in their new neighborhood. So when given the opportunity, Derek would invite some of the neighbors to come and see all the work they had been doing on the home. Now, supposedly during one of these visits, a neighbor's wife would make a comment about having new young blood in the neighborhood. This was never really looked into that I could find, so I'm not sure if that's true or not, or even which neighbor would have made this comment. But what I want to know is, if anyone that lives near or in that town that's listening, do you know if this is like a common phrase around there? Young blood, especially among like the older folk? I want to know. Anyways, so the construction would continue as planned. Then it wouldn't be but a couple weeks later, Maria would swing by the home to check on paint samples and to check their mailbox. That's when she noticed a familiar envelope, and it was addressed to the couple by name this time. It was spelled incorrectly, but he knows their name now. And here's what the second letter says. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move throughout the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Brutus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching. End quote. You would never hear them scream? What kind of sick crap is that? I would be so mad, terrified, all the emotions at this point. But this family just kept on trucking on. They they were honestly a lot tougher than I would have been, that's for sure. Not long later, the family would be invited to a barbecue that was being hosted by a neighbor from across the street. I'm assuming it was kind of like a block party, and that's where like they have all the neighbors come and join, eat, mingle, talk gossip about the neighborhood, stuff like that. And they decided to go because they wanted to stay friendly, but to also scope out the neighbors and see if they could pick up on anything, see if anyone acted suspicious or said anything weird. So Derek would start to talk to a neighbor named John Schmidt. And John lived just 2 doors down from Derek's new home. John talked about the neighbor that lived in between them, and her name was Peggy Langford. And she was an older woman. She was a little over 90 at the time. She shared her home with several of her children, and her children were at least 60 or older. So John would tell Derek that the family was kind of eccentric, but he never really saw them as a threat. And he did mention that the Langfords had lived in the home since the mid-60s. And this really piqued Derek's interest because the letter insinuated that whoever was watching the home had lived in the neighborhood for many years. So who knows? But soon after this party, Derek would go to the detective who'd been working on the case, and his name was Lugo. Derek found out that Lugo was already well aware of the Langford family, and he had actually spoken with one of Peggy's children named Michael. Now, Michael was unemployed, so he had a lot of time on his hands and was apparently pretty sketchy. But when Lugo brought Michael in for questioning, Michael denied knowing anything about any letters. And Lugo, however, wasn't convinced. Unfortunately, there was nothing tying Michael to the letters other than him being weird, so he couldn't really go any further at this time. Now, Maria and Derek were convinced that it had to be an immediate neighbor that was right next to the house. And they believed that the writer of these letters was a local to the area. And that's really because each letter was delivered via U.S. Postal Service Distribution Center in Kearney. And Kearney was about 18 miles from Westfield. And they also noticed that the first letter was postmarked June 4th. And while the contractors arrived on property a day before the first letter was sent out, but no one close to the home had any idea work had even started. But at this point, they were at a dead end. And with the family's fear increasing because of the constant feeling of being watched, they decided to quit bringing their children to the new home, and they would start to wonder if purchasing this home was a big mistake. Which is really upsetting to think about because this was supposed to be one of the happiest times of their life. They finally were able to purchase a home of their dreams, and some stupid, sick person decides to mess it all up for them. Anyways, several weeks would pass after the second letter was sent, and they would receive a third. And here's what it says. 657 Boulevard is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend, and now it is my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass, and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. End quote. That phrase, young blood, just really irritates me. Absolutely hate it. Not a fan. Now, the family did look into the theory that this could have potentially been a person who tried to buy the home when they did. Now, the Woods family had lived in the home since 1990 until they sold it in 2014. They told Derek and Maria that they had many that exceeded their asking price. So this made the family consider that the writer of these letters could be one of the people who lost the home and now has a grudge against them for winning the bidding war. Andrea Woods would tell them that one possible buyer had a medical condition, and that's what made him lose the home. I'm not sure why would a medical condition make you lose the home unless like he got sick and just couldn't keep up with the bidding. I really don't know. It didn't go any further into that. And then the other buyer just ended up buying a new home. So there was a dead end on that one. With nothing else to go on, Derek and Maria would start their own investigation. They would set up webcams all around the house, and Derek would stake out his own property and would look for prowlers. So he would just sit in the house in the dark, waiting, just looking for clues on who could be watching them. And he found no one, nothing. So they would end up hiring a private investigator to do background checks on the Langfords since they were the most suspicious at the time, but nothing would be found that was substantial. Derek would even get in touch with a former FBI agent named Robert Linehan, and Robert gave him an analysis of a threat level, and he proposed a possible profile of the sender based on the letters that were sent. Robert believed that the writer of the letters was a well-read person. He thought that the absence of using vulgar or crass language was surprising, and that the author was someone that was less macho than what most people might suspect him to be. He also believes that the Watcher person is erratic, but unlikely to follow through on any threats. I really don't know if this analysis was very helpful for the family. I definitely know it would not have been helpful for me, that's for sure. But the Langfords would still be prime suspects for a while. The investigators would end up bringing Michael in for questioning again, but Michael would continue to deny any involvement. And Michael's sister, Abby, was getting mad. She was accusing the police of harassing her family, and that's when the story would just start to escalate. Eventually, Derek would hire a lawyer named Lee Levitt, and Lee would meet with several of the Langford family members along with their own lawyer. Lee's goal was to try to get the family to understand. So he would show the Langford family the contents of the letters, and then he would explain to them why they were considered suspects. But the Langford family would maintain their innocence. They just said, "We know nothing about these letters. Leave us alone." You know what I mean? Now, eventually the police would go on and run a background check on the entire neighborhood. And they did find a few things that were pretty surprising, to say the least. It turned out that 2 of the local residents were registered sex offenders, which is pretty unsettling. And then there was another home that was close to 657 Boulevard. Their owners had a very strange habit. They would keep a couple of their lawn chairs very close to Derek and Maria's garden and would literally face it directly. It's very weird. Just looking into their garden, which is potentially their yard and their house. But unfortunately, the police didn't find anything on anyone that would really link them to the letters, and that is when the case would go cold. Now, what I found very strange is that when the police would examine the letters, they wouldn't find any fingerprints on them. And with people using the public mailboxes every day, the police believed there would be very little chance that they would be able to find the Watcher in the act of posting that letter. So at this point, they reached an end to their active investigation. And with them being unable to find fingerprints, I find that very eerie. Like, to me, it means that they are very meticulous. They know what they're doing. They know how to avoid getting caught. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the letters were also typed, so they couldn't compare handwriting or anything like that. I think I read that somewhere, so let me know if I'm wrong on that. And now by this time, the renovations on the home were done. But even though they had a new alarm system, Derek didn't feel that it was enough security. He would even post an ad on a website requesting a house guard with military experience. And then he also looked into purchasing trained German shepherds. So that's really sad, which I don't blame him, because every single letter mentions their children. I mean, you've got to think that's got to be some sort of predator. Why else would someone be sending letters talking about wanting to watch their children? Watch the young blood, they call it. It's really disturbing to me. But anyways, rant over. But they quickly began to realize that with all of these steps that they would take in order to somewhat feel safe from the Watcher, it would make their dream home feel like a prison. They would never truly feel safe unless this person was caught. Derek and Maria would end up selling their previous home, and they ended up moving in with Maria's parents instead of the new home. Soon, money would start to get tight, and they still had to pay the new mortgage as well as the expenses that came with such a big home. But they stuck with the police's advice and did not tell anyone about the letters. They only told people who really needed to know. Even their close friends didn't know anything about the letters. Now, since they weren't moving into their new home, their neighbors were starting to really question why. Why did they do all this work to just let it sit there? The family would then tell the neighbors that legal issues prevented them from moving in, which, they didn't lie. But all of this really took a toll on the family, especially Derek and Maria. Derek would admit that he could no longer sleep at night and that his doctor had to prescribe him medication to help him sleep. And Maria would start to see a therapist, and he would end up diagnosing her with post-traumatic stress disorder. I could not imagine. They both were at their wits' end at this point. They felt that the best cure for them was to just get rid of the home and sell it. And at this time, they'd only owned the home for a short 6 months. They would put it back on the market, but they did list it for a higher price than what they paid for it. They say it's because of the additions that they had made, which makes sense. People do that, right? They put money into it. They're going to sell it for more, right? That's just common sense. Now, however, with the media and the local gossip going around about the home, it would make the home very undesirable to potential buyers, which would really make Derek and Maria kind of take a step back and think, like, would we even have really purchased the home if we knew about the Watcher? So they started getting really upset because they felt trapped, and they were mad that the Woods family didn't tell them about the letter that they had received before Derek and Maria bought the home. They felt that it should have been disclosed, and now they are stuck in a nightmare, essentially. So they found out that there is this law that does state that serious offenses committed within a home, such as like a murder, must be mentioned during a potential sale. So Maria and Derek wanted to see if something like this would count towards that law. But the Woods family never felt as though they were under any danger when living in the home. They stated that they would even leave their doors unlocked when they lived in that home. They felt safe there. But Derek and Maria were struggling. So a year after purchasing this home, they would file a legal lawsuit against the Woods family. They stated that the law required full disclosure of the letter the Woods received just prior to closing, which I kind of get where they're coming from. This family was terrified to live in their dream home. So I kind of get it, but I also kind of understand the Woods' side. Like, if they're not lying, okay? If they really did just get one letter, then I kind of get their point. Like, they've lived there for so long and then they randomly get this letter when they decide to move. Why need to mention that? Depending on how threatening it was, why need to mention that? But if the reason for them leaving the home was because of these letters and they actually got more than what they're saying, then yes, I completely understand that they should have disclosed. But they are not claiming that they got more than one letter, so that's all we got to go by because there's no proof. The legal suit is what would cause a local reporter to hear about what was going on with this family, and they heard about this mysterious watcher in the letters. So this would cause news vans to be a regular thing outside the home. Well, outside the 657 home, not the home they were currently living in with her parents. Derek and Maria would receive hundreds of requests from the media, but they were told to not speak about their experiences until things were completed. So they were silent. But because of this sudden popularity, Derek and Maria would decide to leave Westfield altogether. They were done at this point. And with the news covering this story, you could imagine that the people in the neighborhood were concerned. Like, they wanted to know who it was too. There's some weirdo in the neighborhood stalking people. I mean, wouldn't you want to know if that was going on in your neighborhood? I would. I wouldn't be living here if that was the case. I do have very thick curtains on my windows. No one is looking in. I'm cautious. That's what I am. I'm cautious. Now, one thing that the police did do was test the DNA that was on the envelopes the Watcher had used. Results showed that the DNA was feminine, so that was kind of surprising. And this would draw attention to Abby Langford, Michael's sister. Now, people would suspect that it was because she was a realtor and that she felt jealous that she wasn't chosen by the Woods family to sell their home and that she missed out on a very nice commission. But they were able to receive a water bottle that Abby had used, and the DNA did not match. Shortly after this, the prosecutor's office would let Derek and Maria know that they would be removing the Langfords as suspects altogether. Essentially, there was just no solid proof, and they had to move on if they were going to make any progress. Now, however, the police would restart the investigation from scratch, essentially try to see if maybe they missed something in the beginning. So they would ask Andrea Woods if she would provide a DNA sample, and they questioned her 21-year-old son, but nothing would come of that, so they were removed as suspects as well. Then suddenly, there would be a breakthrough. It appeared that the Watcher had targeted another home, a family that was living on the boulevard for quite some time, and they had received a mysterious letter around the same time Derek got his first letter. But like the Woods family, they threw it away thinking it was just some prank. One of their grown children just happened to mention it on Facebook, and the police saw it, and they would go and speak with this family, and they did confirm that the letter sounded similar to the one Derek had received. So because of this new development, the police decided to stake out the street one night. At around 11 p.m., there was a car that parked very close to the van that the police were in, and it just stayed there for a long time. So this kind of made the officers suspicious. They would run the car's plates, and it traced back to a young woman who lived in a nearby town. And her boyfriend actually lived on the same street as 657 Boulevard. At this time, he had been playing like a certain video game. And get this, in this video game, the character is named the Watcher. How crazy is that? I mean, that can't be a coincidence, right? So the police tried to get this boyfriend into the station for an interview, and both times he just never showed up. But what I want to know is why they didn't take the girlfriend's DNA. If you heard that they did, let me know, because I couldn't find that they actually took the girlfriend's DNA at all and were just interested in speaking with the boyfriend. And it also didn't suggest what town the girlfriend lived in. So if she lived in Kearney, then it would make sense that she was either the one sending these letters or the one at least licking the envelopes while her boyfriend typed the letters. And then, she could just take the letter and mail it on her way home, but who knows? But since they couldn't move forward with the boyfriend, the police just closed the investigation. I kind of feel like that was pretty premature, in my opinion. They should have tried harder. Not dogging the police. I really do respect the police. I have family that are on the police force. And I kind of feel like, from what I read, this could totally be the opposite. But the articles that I read, it just seemed like they didn't take it seriously. And that's probably because nothing really happened other than the letters. You know what I mean? Like, no one was seen stalking this house. No one was seen peeking in the windows. No one was seen on the property. Even in the cameras that they set up, other than these letters, there was just no proof. That's the only other reason why I would think they really didn't take it too seriously. But I really don't know. That's just my assumption. I'm just thinking and ranting as I'm talking. So now, after the failed attempt to sell 657 Boulevard, they made the proposal to a planning board to grant them the rights to subdivide the property. They couldn't find a single family buyer, so they decided that they wanted to get a developer to tear down the house and build 2 new houses and sell those on 2 separate lots instead. Now, I thought this request was kind of odd. Tearing down the house would just make the Watcher even more angry, you would think. Also, they put all this money into fixing up the house. I was kind of wondering where they would even get the money if they were hurting financially. Where would they get the money to tear down the house and then build 2 new houses? I didn't quite get that. I don't know all the specifics to that. I just thought that was kind of odd. But in early 2017, their request was denied. So because of this, the family decided that they would just rent out the home for now until they could figure out what to do. They eventually found a renter who was willing to live there despite the Watcher letters. And at this point, the Watcher had been silent, so they were pretty hopeful that they would not send another letter and that them finding a renter would help offset the mortgage for the family. It wouldn't cover the full payments, but it would kind of help ease that financial burden that they were claiming to have. Now, it would be just 2 weeks after the renter moved in that they would receive a 4th letter. And this one was far more threatening than the others. And the letter didn't address the renter, just Derek and Maria. And here's what it said. "You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and you are scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. And then the letter would get even more threatening, and it would say, maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break. End quote. This would be the last letter that they received from the Watcher. I don't like it. It's a terrible letter. Absolutely terrifying. Now, there are people out there that believe that Derek and Maria made this whole thing up and tried to pull off a scam and that this would somehow benefit them. I don't believe that's the case. His family was harassed on social media and by mainstream media. They were depressed and they didn't feel safe in their new home because of these letters. And I mean, other families got these letters. Like that one family claimed that they got the letter the same day Derek did. So why would Derek send himself this letter and then send the same letter to a neighbor down the road that he doesn't know? It doesn't make sense. I don't think they did this. And as far as I could tell after reading, there's just nothing that they benefited from this. They would eventually sell the home in 2019, but for way less than what they put into it. They had a loss of $341,000, if not more, because of all the improvements that they put into it. And the Watcher has still not been caught. And as far as we know, the letters have stopped. The new owners haven't claimed to have gotten any letters, at least. And I want to know what you all think and who you think it is. Now, in the fourth letter, it does say turn around. So I thought that was kind of odd. Like, do you think it's the weird people in the garden? Because I think they're behind the house. Not 100% sure, but I think they are. So that's kind of weird, right? I don't know what they meant by that. Or do you think it's Michael? Or is it the girlfriend and the boyfriend? I'm kind of leaning towards the girl and the boyfriend, only because, they couldn't really get evidence to rule them out. But I mean, I could be totally wrong. But also the letters, it just gives this vibe of like an older person, not younger. It could very well be a younger person, but I just get this vibe that just someone older, someone who's been around for a long time, just by how they word things. So you know what I mean? It's just my assumption. But I've always found this story very creepy and very interesting, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it and get your take on it. I hope you enjoyed it, even if you've heard of this story. I feel like everyone here has heard this story because it was really weird when it happened. So if you did enjoy this episode, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell. It does help out my channel, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. I've got another good video coming out that I'm excited to talk about. But anyways, I hope you guys have a very blessed day. I'll see you later. Bye.